Welcome to Nice Ashes. I'm Nate.
And I'm Mike. What are we smoking today, Nate?
We are smoking an Oliva, Connecticut.
Yes, we've
smoked other Olivas, but I don't know if we've ever smoked a Connecticut here.
We have not. This is part of a series of cigars that we're going to smoke on the show. So we're going to have a G, we're going to have an O. I think we might have a V. I'd like to get my hand on a Cane F, which we smoked the Cane F nub, but I'd like to smoke a full-size Cane F.
Now, are you doing a cross-cut on this one or just the regular V?
That's a good question. I think I'm going to do just a regular V.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking with the diameter. I didn't get a particularly good flavor when I put it in my mouth to wet it, so we'll see.
It's pretty generic tasting. At least, At
least initially. Okay. Not a huge fan of the first puff, but you never judge a cigar by its first puff unless it's the fucking undercrown. You never judge a book by its cover.
Mm-hmm.
What are you pairing your cigar with, Mike? I heard you pouring some stuff before we started.
Yes. I was running late, ladies and gentlemen. I have some Johnny Walker Black and some ginger beer. Nice. I can't remember the brand of the ginger beer, but it's a fancy one that you mix with SodaStream stuff.
There you go.
Yep.
I am drinking a Stella Artois.
Some wife beater. Holy shit.
Yeah, I don't know. I had a buddy come over earlier in the week, and he brought a 4-pack of Grolsch, and I hadn't had a Grolsch in forever, and kind of got my beer palate thinking, man, I should do some Stella. Just something a little lighter, not quite as heavy.
Yeah, it's nice. I try to stick to Stella in the summer when it's hot.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of lake bars have Stella on tap, so you can pull up to the dock and get a beer at like noon when you're out on the water all day. So we're discussing this, and we cut ourselves short. We have to be very careful about this book that we're going to talk about.
We're doing a book review. We have to be careful about the book, and I think the other thing that we need to be careful of is because this book is... I guess I was looking at the Wikipedia page for it earlier today, and it's not a very unbiased Wikipedia page.
I'm shocked.
It's a full-on conspiracy book and things like that. So I think the other thing we need to be careful about is that we're not supporting conspiracies or conspiracy theories, but we're doing a book review of this, and then kind of like what we try to always do is find out some kind of middle ground or just have a discussion about it. We're doing this for educational purposes, philosophical purposes. We want to see these ideas because there is a ton of ideas presented in this book, a ton. So it's not like one idea. It's multiple ideas and multiple things. So we're just trying to go through some of it. We're not experts. We're not authors, we're not medical professionals, and we're not lawyers. So our caveat.
We are none of those things. Also, nobody has been sued as a result of this book, which if the claims being made were in the land of crazy conspiracy, I would assume that there would be at least one person mentioned suing the author. Right?
Yeah, the author was not nice with nicknames for involved parties.
No, he directly. So we're reviewing The Real Anthony Fauci by Robert Kennedy Jr. For those who aren't aware yet. And he does not make nicknames up. He just says who it was and what they said and what they did. And he makes some pretty bold claims.
Yes. Well, he does call Fauci, Little Napoleon quite a few times or something.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes.
I mean, he's not one to shy away from nicknames. So it's interesting because in the book here it says, or on the Wikipedia page here it says, The Real Anthony Fauci, and there's a subtitle as well called Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy and Public Health.
Yes.
And it's a 2021 book by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., in which, and this is Wikipedia's terms, in which he attacks Anthony Fauci and his 3 decades of leadership at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, in the book, Kennedy offers misinformation about Fauci's role during the HIV epidemic and the COVID-19 pandemic and HIV/AIDS denialism. And so it says it was a 480-page book written by anti-vaccination conspiracy theorist Robert F. Kennedy Jr., which is interesting because didn't Robert F. Kennedy Jr. kind of get his start as an environmental lawyer?
Yes. So I listened to several interviews with him when he was right before he announced that he was running for president. And he was a environmental lawyer who won a lot of lawsuits, and he's won a lot of awards because he is apparently a very competent environmental lawyer. He was instrumental in getting the Hudson River cleaned up, and he's one of the founding members of Water Keepers or something like that. Okay. If I remember correctly. And they kind of go around the globe and sue corporations for polluting waters, more or less.
Yeah, a worthy a cause as any.
Yes. And then, so he didn't get started into the vaccine stuff until the 90s. And it happened at a conference he was holding about mercury poisoning in a river somewhere. Now I can't remember. And an advocacy group came up to him and provided him with data, and he started doing research into it. And he actually got a few chemicals they were using in vaccines banned because he found data that it was, in fact, damaging people. Like they were using a type of mercury in the vaccines in the 80s that was correlated with negative health outcomes. So it's not like he's got the chops, right? Like he's not necessarily a conspiracy theorist. He did file lawsuits and win those lawsuits and prevented certain chemicals from being in vaccines in the future.
Yeah, and I guess, like, let's just offer a counterpoint there because I've never met him. I've never watched any of his interviews or anything like that. I mean, it could be a Tom Cruise situation, right? Like, everybody thinks Tom Cruise in the 90s, whatever, he's making all these great films, and then suddenly he's jumping up and down on Oprah Winfrey's couch. So it's not to say, like, that he is or isn't. I mean, he could be a conspiracy theorist for all I know. And I think we're going to get into that with some of the things, some of the ideas he presented, because I have questions. But I think it's weird that they bill him as an anti-vaxxer because I remember when you first told me about this book, Mike, I was looking him up a little bit, and it sounded like his children are all vaccinated, and that he claims he's not necessarily anti-vaccine, but he's pro-safe vaccines and pro right to choose.
Yes, that is his position, according to him, is that he is pro-informed consent. He's pro-transparency in medicine and in the environment and everything else. He is personally vaccinated fully against measles, mumps, rubella, all the things that we're all vaccinated against. His children are vaccinated against these things, but he is against the current vaccine schedule, which he thinks has too many vaccines with too many of these inflammatory agents happening. You know what I mean? He's criticizing the schedule, and he has criticisms about how things are done. He's not against medicine or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it from his book, it doesn't sound like he's against science.
No.
He's not against medicine, but I guess getting into it is he's against if you believe what he says about Anthony Fauci and Bill Gates, he's against the one or two people setting themselves up as not only the policymakers, but the direct beneficiaries of those policies.
Right. Well, and I don't know how much he mentioned in the book. Now I can't remember. But the way that the FDA and the NIH are set up, the people who are on the governing boards for who gets their vaccines passed get to take profits from the vaccines that they pass. So they have an economic incentive to get as many medicines out as possible.
Well, and they also get co-patenting rights or something because Fauci has, I don't remember how many he said, but there's a lot more than you would think somebody that's trying to just keep people safe would have.
Right. I mean, they're directly profiting from the medicines that they allow to go to market.
Yeah.
And then if you look at the funding of the agencies, like 40% of the funding comes from the money they get from allowing new drugs to go through. You know what I mean? Like they are incentivized to allow drugs to pass. A lot of the
people on the FDA or on these boards are all formerly employees of Microsoft,
Yeah.
according to what he said. I didn't go back and do any fact checking and stuff. And it's funny because I've been reading this book for a while, and I know it's only 480 pages, but it kind of took me a bit because it's not like an easy breezy. It's very data heavy, whether or not you think the data is true or not. I mean, it's just a data heavy book.
Well, so one thing that is in his favor is that it is so data heavy and it has references for all of these data points. So if he fabricated data, surely the doctor that he's citing as the producer of this work would sue him. He's a very rich, famous guy. You would think that this bestseller book that would have a falsified report would be in the court somewhere. And now he's running for president, so they could take him down easily with a lawsuit claiming something like that,
Yep.
So,
well, and it might, so that's the weird thing is he makes all these claims, and to Mike's point, you think, well, if anything in there was false, they would sue him or, pull the book from shelves or what have you. But part of the planning in the last two chapters of the book talk about kind of the germ games, kind of like the war games, but the Fauci and Bill Gates put on some, hey, what if a pandemic happens that's just like COVID, and then like a couple weeks later it actually happened or something, or a couple months later it actually happened. And they had a whole section, according to Kennedy, about how to quash people that don't agree. And so now that he's running for president, their plan might just be all we have to do is call him a crazy person in the debates, and that's the end of it. And he's running third party, so I don't think anyone's truly worried.
No, well, he can't run the Democratic Party. They've already said they're not going to hold primaries or debates. They're going to hold primaries, but they're not going to hold debates. And we all know, or people who are aware know, that the primaries in the Democratic Party do not matter because the superdelegates outnumber the primary delegates. So theoretically, you could win every primary in the country and still lose the nomination to the party. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't serve any function.
Let's delve in a little bit into some of the book topics, and then I can share some of my thoughts too and whatnot. But do you want to take a stab at going through some of the stuff that he's talking about?
Sure. So it's very data heavy, so we're going to skip the data largely, guys. If you want to read it, if you're on the fence about whether or not you think certain things in the past 3 to 4 years were legitimate, it might be an interesting read for you. Let's put it that way. Would you say that's fair, Nate?
I would say that's fair. I would say that I think the way that the pandemic happened, at first, nobody knew what was going on in the general population anyway. And I think since then, and since kind of all the emergency stuff, there's been some things that have come out that maybe lend a little credence to some of the things that he's talking about in this book. I think I always had a problem with the vaccine mandates. I still got vaccinated because you literally couldn't go anywhere, but it didn't sit right with me that it was mandated.
Mm-hmm.
They were all free, but they weren't free. But we didn't pay for them out of our pockets. But all that taxpayer money that we did pay for out of our pockets ended up going to these same people that basically tanked the economy because they locked it down for 3 years and they ran a whole bunch of small businesses out. And that data, that's not a conspiracy theory at all, because we have the statistics. So many small businesses closed because they didn't have the capital to pivot to an online model or what have you, or, the mandates negatively affected them more. And the government kind of told people which stores were necessary. So...
And they all happen to be major businesses that could buy off government officials. Just coincidentally. Yeah. I think the phrase in RFK used, and I've heard this from others, was that it's the largest upward transfer of wealth in the history of our society, right?
Yes. And there's data to back that up, because the CEOs, the upper 1% gained as much money as the middle class and everybody else lost in buying power and stuff. So...
Oh, yeah. I'm way worse off than I was, 4 years ago. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say way worse off, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It hasn't been great as far as economics go.
Yeah.
So,
and he was talking about, and I'm going to just butcher these because I just, hydroxychloroquine, and ivermectin.
Yes.
And those were two that RFK was saying would drastically help with the COVID-19 symptoms and your recovery time. And he said that the reason, this is one of the big points of the book, I think. He said the reason Fauci and everybody else didn't want those drugs to be used is because they were dirt cheap and their patents expired, so Big Pharma couldn't profit off of them. So they had to then say that they were horse pills or whatever. And the point he makes in the book is that these things can be used to deworm horses, but they do parasites in all mammals, and all mammals are similar in regards to parasites, I guess. So
right. And he explained in extreme detail, like there's 20 different avenues that hydroxychloroquine acts on, different pathways in the body, and that essentially it prevents viruses from being able to replicate as efficiently. So it eliminates, it lowers the overall viral load, so your body's immune response can overcome what's left in your body. It makes a lot of sense.
It makes sense. I
makes
looked
sense.
up ivermectin on the National Library of Medicine here, and it's a .gov. And it just says ivermectin has been used to treat humans for the past 4 decades. It initially was approved as a broad-spectrum anti-parasitic agent in 1987. And it was given as a mass drug, an MDA, mass drug administration in endemic countries. So it says that it showed highly significant reduction in viral RNA after 48 hours in relation to COVID, so 99.8%. But it was criticized that it achieved that by using a higher dosage in comparison to the standard human dose.
Which RFK's claim was that
they did that purposefully.
They did that on purpose in the study to make it look like it couldn't be used because they wanted to use on-patent medicines, because then Fauci and all of his friends could profit on on these medicines.
Yes. And here, the next sentence on this Library of Medicine is the anti-COVID activity in real-life patients who were treated with a standard dose of 3 days of ivermectin showed significant reduction in culture viability compared to the placebo group. So it seems like there is some science to back up at least the ivermectin.
Yes. So he mentioned other things other than those two, which were...
Those were kind of the two big ones. But he also mentioned zinc.
Yep, zinc, which I didn't know until COVID that you could use zinc to lower your viral load of the common cold. So you should be taking zinc basically all winter.
I take zinc. I've been taking zinc every day since I read this book. Not that I believe what he says.
I actually started taking zinc in 21 during the winter time because apparently it helps you fight off viruses. And I was like, well,
we've been getting weird summer colds too. So
we
have small kids, so I might just as well just take it all year. Like, who cares?
Right. And vitamin D. See, vitamin D was talked about in 21 as well, because initially the groups in the United States that were getting hit the hardest were like the Somali population down in Minneapolis. And they investigated it, and the same group was having issues in Sweden.
Okay.
And it was because their vitamin D was low, because they're very dark-skinned people in very northern climates, and they wear lots of clothes in the summer. So they weren't getting enough vitamin D production. So that's actually backed up external to the book,
Yes. And I've been taking vitamin D. I went in for labs about a year ago, and my doctor's like, yeah, you probably need to just take a vitamin D supplement. But I didn't spend a whole lot of time in the sun this summer. It was a weird summer. But yeah, I think vitamin D and zinc, you should just add them to your regular. We're not doctors or nutritionalists, but there's enough other good data out there that you could make an informed decision for yourself. I'm about halfway done with this cigar, Mike.
I'm not quite halfway, but I'm just behind you.
I don't know. It's okay.
It's fine. It's not bad. It's not great.
It's got just a tinge of bitterness, I think, that I'm not really jiving with.
Yeah, it's a little off. I don't know what it is, but it could be just me.
I don't think it's just you if we're both saying it's like, there's a little thing off there, but I don't know. Who knows? It's tough to say sometimes.
Right. So
I think, go on, Mike.
Oh no, I was going to say in relation to the actual COVID arguments, he basically, to sum it up, like I say, we can't get into everything because it's so data driven. But the gist was that Anthony Fauci is in charge of funding research, and he refused to fund accurate research, and the research he did fund into off-patent medicines was purposefully botched. And he showed a couple studies where they gave 400 times the safe dose of hydroxychloroquine. And then, of course, people died from the overdose. But they gave 400 times the safe dose and 200 times the dose they know is going to kill everyone. Yeah. So that's a pretty bold claim.
Yeah, it's not the boldest claim of the book, but...
No, the bolder claims come later.
Yeah. We'll save those kind of more for the end, I guess, if we get into them. Then
yes,
he walks through all these things, and basically the first maybe half of the book explains how these different boards and oversight committees get made and how they are populated with Fauci and Gates crew.
And industry insiders.
Yeah, and how they are able to patent anything that the company, that their government body creates. They can also get in on the patent, so they also get royalties for every unit sold. And it just kind of explains, I mean, everybody should know that there's huge money to be made in American healthcare, in pharmaceuticals and treatment and insurance, everything related to medical. So that shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody.
And it shouldn't come as a surprise that regulatory capture happens in many industries in the United States, and that there's a revolving door between the regulators and the companies that are being regulated. So oftentimes the people who are acting as the regulator used to work for the company that they are now regulating and are going to work for them again in the future.
Yes. Almost like being a Supreme Court justice and deciding cases from the cruise ship that the person you're trying to case against puts you up on, or something of that nature.
Yeah, I mean it's yeah, exactly. You're on your worldwide trip, and you're calling cases against the very people that paid for your worldwide trip every year for 30 years.
Yeah. I know this guy. He's a stand-up fellow. He did nothing wrong.
Yep, surely.
So I think it's only 480 pages, but like we said at the top, there's so many claims are made, so many things are discussed, and it doesn't really feel helter-skelter in the book. I mean, it kind of follows. I mean, there are a couple times where I was like, okay, we're shifting gears and jumping over here now, and it all kind of ties back. But he was also talking about, and we mentioned this, it was on the Wikipedia, where he's talking about, and it was really weird because he phrases things very strangely sometimes in this book. So there was one, and I remember reading it, and he was talking about how HIV totally does not cause AIDS, because of the way they defined HIV was so broad that almost anybody who tests for HIV will have it, because they've made the definition of HIV so broad that there's not really a single HIV thing. And people who said that they found like the HIV, I don't know if it's the protein or the cell or the whatever it is, have since recanted and said that they actually didn't find it. But then at the end of that chapter, he says, I don't disbelieve that HIV causes AIDS, just for the record. So I don't really understand what the point of that is, unless he's just trying to CYA, cover his ass.
Well, the point was, and this is what I think, is it was an example of how Anthony Fauci systematically muddies the water.
Yeah.
So that you don't know what is and what is not true. And that way, he and his buddies can patent medicines and get them passed through all of these little boards, and then they profiteer on it because he's the highest paid government employee, and he's the one that's the power broker handing out grant money. So everybody wants to do what Anthony wants. He's like the little kingpin on this system.
He's like the mob boss. If you help him do his thing, he'll toss you some good stuff your way or whatever. Mm-hmm. So exactly. I mean, that part is, and I've been reading this book for a while, and I told my Sarah about it, which I guess was a little bit of a mistake. She's like, "Oh, you're reading that conspiracy book again, huh?" And I finally sat down with her, and I was like, or we had a date night, and so we were able to talk uninterrupted. And I was just like, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I believe every single thing in it, but the thing is that if even one of the things in this book is true, it's huge. Like if even one of the things is true, it's huge. So
yes,
I guess that's kind of my viewpoint on the book.
Well, it is true. So it is true that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation caused a polio outbreak.
Yeah,
they caused a polio outbreak.
They put what, live polio cultures in their vaccines?
Well, they're using a vaccine that's been banned in the United States and Europe because we had a polio outbreak from this style of vaccine. But they still had it patented so they could still make profit on it and charge the governments for it. Yep. So they gave them this lesser vaccine that's more dangerous to these third world countries and then charged their governments for it, which ultimately came out of the American taxpayer dollar because they're getting medical funding.
Yeah, and it goes back probably to the Confessions of an Economic Hitman, where they have the World Bank or something, and they offer to fund infrastructure for these third world countries or these less well-off countries, and they can get a loan for this, and then these big pharma people are still getting paid. They don't care where it comes from, right? And RFK did make several not straight out, I don't think, accusations, but some references to they were using these clinical trials, and Bill Gates is using the let's eradicate whatever from the armpit of the world. No offense if you live in the armpit of the world. Anyone in the panhandle of Oklahoma, I'm sorry that you live there. You can move. But no, these other foreign countries, and they were doing it to establish a foothold for oil or gold or other American interests in that area outside of health things. But the health reason opened the door to get Americans in there.
Right. And that's a well-known strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound out of the realm of reality. Even if you don't research any of this stuff, you're like, I could see them doing that.
It sounds perfectly reasonable. I will put a criticism out, is he was using data from countries that I don't think are going to provide reliable data.
I know. Right? It was like the first chapter or something. He was like, and China eradicated COVID in the first 3 months. That's like, I guarantee you that's bullshit.
He listed like Canada, the United States, France, Belgium, Japan, communist China, and Algeria. And like, it's a lot of, these are not all the same. South Korea and Algeria. I believe data from South Korea. I do not believe data from Sudan. Okay.
No, or China. The North Korean dictator went and punched all the COVID out of North Korea or something.
Right. Like the data from India is probably pretty good and reliable, but I'm going to guess that the data from Inner Mongolia is less so. Like they just don't have the infrastructure. It's not that they're bad actors. They just don't have the infrastructure to be able to accurately record it.
Yeah, they don't have the reporting. They don't have the reporting.
Right. And he talked about how our data, the United States data, was manipulated, and that is also true.
That is also true. I remember
that is also saying, true.
Oh, so-and-so died of COVID. It could be, they maybe had COVID-like symptoms, and then they got into an automobile accident. COVID or something. I mean, it was almost as ridiculous as that. I remember. Yeah.
I mean, this is like an apocryphal story, so don't take it as gospel, anybody. But my coworker's brother-in-law died in a motorcycle crash, and they said that he died of COVID, according to him. Now, whether is that true, I don't know. But they had COVID on his death certificate all the same, and he flipped a motorcycle on the highway.
Yeah.
So, again, I cannot verify that story.
Yeah. It's not out of the realm of possibility, because I saw some pretty crazy stories on the internet. Therefore, it has to be true, right?
Exactly. But yeah, anyway, so
there's enough people that criticize the government's response, and I think if you're on the fence, if the government exploited the pandemic, I mean, I'm not saying the pandemic didn't happen. I'm just saying if you're on the fence on whether or not the government exploited the pandemic, probably a good book for you to read just to get a differing viewpoint.
Yeah. We have to be very careful about the details and the claims made, because we don't want to get in trouble, and we are not part of the royal family of the United States, so we don't have the sort of economic backing and protection that RFK Jr. has. So
yeah, neither of us, neither of our last names are Kennedy, Bush, Clinton, Gates, Musk. So,
Bezos, we are not of the Bezos clan.
Yeah, we're just whatever. But I did find it interesting that Bezos and Gates owned a lot of newspapers, at least according to RFK.
Oh, they do.
Washington Post and stuff.
Yeah.
So then, I mean, that just further proves that you're not going to get. So, of course, if you're going to, let's just for a moment go down and say, hey, RFK is 100% absolutely telling the truth. He's not exaggerating. He's not lying. Everything he says is the truth. Well, all these people he's criticizing in this book own all the newspapers and the media. So, of course, if they want to call him a conspiracy nut and put it on his Wikipedia page, then
they certainly could.
And they did, because I just read, I'm like, this is not an impartial Wikipedia page for this.
No,
for this person
Wikipedia
who's a well-known environmental lawyer.
A world-renowned environmental lawyer who's won many cases, who's also won cases in court involving chemicals and vaccines that were removed. So it's not like he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
He's not a crackpot.
No, he's not a psycho. He's not talking out of his ass. He has a record of having done these things, like in reality.
He's not living in an RV down by the river off the grid,
No, he personally knows Anthony Fauci and has for years. Like, he is a part of the ruling elite of the country. So he's kind of a whistleblower. I mean, I know that I got vaccinated right away because I believed the claims that were made on television that it would prevent you from passing the virus along. And I know a lot of elderly people. My parents are elderly. I bowl with a lot of elderly people. And
bowling
I didn't want to be responsible.
We're not even talking bowling.
I know,
Just
right?
kidding, Mike.
I didn't want to be responsible for getting one of them sick with COVID and possibly dying, right?
Yeah.
And there was a court case in Europe, and the European Union brought up a spokesperson for Pfizer, and Pfizer openly said that they never claimed that the vaccine would stop transmission, and they never tested it.
Yep.
But Rachel Maddow was certainly telling people that. The president of the United States was certainly telling people that. So the company itself never made that claim, but the spokespeople that these companies are paying, they said it, right? Like, Pfizer is paying CNN, and CNN says it.
Yeah. Similar story to me is, I had a small child at the time, and I wanted to get vaccinated of my own free will. I didn't like that it was mandated, but I would have gotten vaccinated anyway because we had a newborn at the time. And I was like, well, if I don't get sick, then my newborn can't get sick. And, they didn't have anything approved for children until I think a year and a half ago, maybe. Mm-hmm. And it was the same thing. If I get vaccinated, then I won't get it and I won't pass it. But then all the data came out that you can have it, but be non-symptomatic, and you can still pass it along to other people who may or may not be symptomatic.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think the part where in the book where RFK was saying that Fauci would invent, or he'd have people invent this new vaccine, he would go to the media before the scientific journal was even published, before the peer review phase, and say, we've got this brand new thing. It's going to kick this disease's butt. Go get it. And he just did an end around the scientific process.
Right. He'd sweeten the well. It's like the opposite of poisoning the well in a conversation. He'd sweeten it up, but also never claimed he was making money on it. Of course he wants you to take it.
He never disclosed that he was making money on it.
He never disclosed that he was going to make money on it.
Yeah.
Right. And Bill Gates, too. They had Bill Gates on TV talking about it. And he was a major stakeholder in the company that was manufacturing the vaccine.
Yeah.
That was never disclosed, that Bill Gates is going to make $500 million on this thing or whatever.
Yeah,
and you would think
making a ton of money.
Yeah. You would think that he being that rich would make him immune to wanting to make more money, but that is not how it works.
No, that's not how it works. It's like you give somebody cocaine and they say, no, I had it once. I don't need it ever again. That's not usually how that goes.
No, they want more. They want all of it.
Yes.
And the research, I actually looked this up to verify my data, but the research that they conducted in the last decade has shown and proven that the wealthier somebody is, the more cognitive dissonance they have about people who are poor. So somebody like Bill Gates probably views the average person as no different than a lab rat. From his perspective, we are just rats that he can test on and exploit. It's like talking to the people who get psychotic.
Yeah, one of the later chapters of the book alleges that they've Gates and Fauci and company have killed, I don't know, tens of thousands, if not more, kids and people in these poor countries they test their vaccines on because they don't have the same testing restrictions or requirements that, say America or Canada or pretty much any country in Europe have to protect citizens from this. And they oftentimes ran without a placebo group and allegedly, according to RFK, would give these known poisonous vaccines to people, telling them that they were vitamins or boosters or something, and not ever fully disclosing what they were actually giving them.
Yes.
Allegedly by the author of the book.
Alleged by the author of the book, and he has not been sued for claiming that. I think he did call them mass murderers at one point.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
I think he did say that Fauci and Bill Gates were mass murderers. We are not saying that. Robert Kennedy Jr. made that claim. And a claim like that he has not been sued for that. This is a best-selling book, and he has not been sued for that claim.
Yes. The other thing to be aware of, I think, Mike, is that you can't, I don't know that you can't, but it's pretty hard to slander or libel someone who's a public figure. In America, you can pretty much say whatever you want about somebody as long as it's not threatening, as long as you're not threatening their life, if they're a public figure. And it depends on how you say things too. If you say, I think Bill Gates is a mass murderer, is different than saying Bill Gates is a mass murderer. Just for example, this is just philosophically, I don't believe Bill Gates is a mass murderer. Or I do, I don't know. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is the phrasing of things. And as a lawyer, even an environmental lawyer, how you phrase things is
paramount.
1/10 of the law. If possession is 9/10, the phrasing is the other 10th. But
right. Well, he also the thing is that he made the claim and then he backed it up with evidence. So you think that they could at least sue over his evidence or refute his evidence or something. I mean, this is not a nothing burger.
No, I'd have to look at it a lot more. I'd have to read it with a different mindset in seeing how he phrases. If he says, the evidence says that Bill Gates is a mass murderer, or did he say, I, RFK, think Bill Gates is a mass murderer? Or did he say, what was the phrasing? I don't know. You're right. I'm sure he really went and scrubbed it many times before he published it.
I'm sure that
he doesn't seem like a person that wants to open himself up to litigation.
He has publicly called for both of them to sue him if any of the claims in the book are false.
Yeah.
But that's, again, he's a public figure. They're a public figure. You can say a lot of shit in the United States.
And get away with it.
And get away with it.
I guess the last little bit, the last chapter 2 or whatever it might have been, I don't remember exactly. He was talking about, and this is what I wanted to talk to you about, Mike, because I figure you're the kind of person that might have already done the research on this, or you might have your own opinions on it. And I remember this was a big topic in the height of the pandemic, is RFK was saying that vaccines cause autism in this book.
He said that. He did not exactly say that. He has never publicly said that exact thing. He says that there is a spike point in the data where autism started to dramatically increase, which was 1984, which coincides with the increase in the vaccine schedule to the modern vaccine schedule. That's the beginning. And that there's a direct correlation between the increasing aggressiveness of the vaccine schedule and increasing rates of autism.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, he certainly seemed to be saying vaccines cause autism.
He's saying that he thinks that they're correlated. He thinks that they're correlated.
Statistically relevant is correlation does not prove causation.
Mm-hmm.
Or does not equal causation.
That is correct.
So, I mean, there could be other factors. I don't know. I didn't look into any of that.
I've looked into it, and there is a correlation, but there's also a correlation between, correlation. We were spraying massive amounts of petrochemicals from the end of World War II into the 1960s. And the 80s is the first generation who were the children of the people who were growing up when those chemicals were being sprayed. So it could be due to the mutagenic chemicals that were being sprayed everywhere in the United States.
I also wonder about cigarette smoking, because I remember as a kid, we'd go to like Perkins or Wendy's or something, and they'd ask, "Do you want smoking or non-smoking?" But you're getting secondhand smoke regardless because they just close like a door. It's not an airtight door. It's not anything. There's no ventilation in there. It's all just smoking, basically. So I could that be? I don't know. I'm not a scientist or doctor.
And again, the kids born in the 80s are going to be the second generation of kids who were born by mothers who were smokers. Was smoking in the womb for 2 generations in a row a mutagenic? There's a lot of factors. I am not subscribing to the idea that vaccines cause autism. Okay.
No, I know. I'm not. I'm saying, like, I feel like
there's a lot of factors that are at play.
Yes. I feel like he lost me a little bit because I wanted him to mention some of these other factors. I understand. I understand his book is, Fauci and Gates are evil, and what the government did during the COVID pandemic is evil, and they've been doing evil
for some
vaccine tests for a long time. Which is, sure, that's all stuff I can get behind, trying to use just correlation and not talking about other things that may or may not impact it. Just kind of lost me a little bit because I guess I was wanting a little more from that section, but
I agree. Well, I thought it was as weak as his use of data from questionable countries, right? Like that's probably not. Yeah. I mean, it's good to add it in, but you don't want to rely too heavy on that data, right?
Yeah.
And just like I say, he on the record has caused the government to ban certain chemicals from being in vaccines that were in vaccines. So he has done boots on the ground work in this area.
Yes.
But it's certainly not the only environmental factor,
Yeah.
How about the introduction of plastics into everything, right? Like there's a lot of
swimming with microplastics or something.
Yeah. There's a lot of environmental factors that are going on that all add up to changes. So,
Yeah. And the other thing I didn't like about the book was he used a lot of the same phrases repeatedly. And it just was kind of got a little repetitive with I don't know if I'll pronounce it right, but like the coup d'etat or whatever it was.
Coup d'etat.
He used it like
coup de grace
57 times in each chapter or something. So I was kind of thinking, okay, it's losing its oomph if you're going to keep using it. Save that for the end then or something.
He was on message. He really does not like Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci.
Yeah, and that's fair.
Yeah, well, that is fair. Like you said,
I don't like anyone who goes to Epstein Island. So
right. Well, and that's a fact. You're right. That is a fact. Yes. And if one of the claims that he made are true, there's a serious problem. And he made a lot of claims, and he had a lot of evidence to back up every single thing that he said. Yep. Maybe not all of it was true, but
hey, maybe not. But it's all. I think that's the important thing, and I think that's why I wanted to talk about it was it's an interesting thought experiment, and we've talked about this before. When I told you I read The Case for Christ, that's not a book I would normally read. I would not normally read this book.
You read it because I suggested it.
Yeah, I read it because you suggested it. I went into it and I was like, I don't know what this is going to be. This could be some weird crap, or this could be interesting. And I think at the end of the day, it's an interesting thought experiment. And if even one thing that he said was true, then he should be exonerated. You know what I mean?
Right. And he's made some pretty crazy claims about political stuff that I don't agree with. It's not like I'm a big RFK supporter in some like religious sense or anything. You know what I mean? Like
we've talked about this before on the show. Is pretty much I'm not a fan of any politician that's willingly there. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he did reference his was Ted his uncle?
Yes.
So he referenced Ted Kennedy. He's like, well, I was really proud my uncle went in and busted this thing up in the 80s. And then he was like, well, I was really proud of my Uncle Ted when he did this in the 90s. And like, okay.
He's an elite. He's an elite American. You know what I mean? Like his experiences in this world are not the same as ours.
No, I mean, and I feel like that was him trying to connect with his audience. Like I was proud of something my uncle did. My uncle My uncle was on the police force for a while. So what do you want me to say? Like, I don't know.
Right. Oh, he flexed like, I
Yeah.
took hydroxychloroquine for years. We went to Africa on safari, 3-4 times a year, every year.
Just like every average American does.
Yeah, exactly. But it was a great example because hydroxychloroquine's an over the counter in most of the world.
Yeah.
It's safe as Tylenol.
Until COVID. It was here until COVID.
It is as safe as Tylenol when you take it in the correct dose. Not 100 times the regular dose. Like the safe dose is the safe dose. It's like iodine. If you drink a bottle of iodine, you're probably not going to be feeling very good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's the same as ibuprofen or anything else. If you take above the thing, then you might have issues.
Right. So. I think I probably had hydroxychloroquine because I went to India for a month and I definitely had to take malaria pills.
Oh, yeah.
So whatever those were.
And you're okay for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't die. I was there in the winter, so that helps.
Yeah.
But, yeah. But yeah,
I think by and large it's an interesting book. I don't know that I 100% agree with everything, but there's
some pretty bold claims.
There's a lot of bold claims. There's a lot of claims that seem well within the realm of possibility, especially with how the big pharma and the FDA approval process works.
Yes.
So I think anytime you read any kind of book or even any kind of news article, like who's writing it and why, RFK just hates Fauci and Gates, so that's his motivation.
Yep.
And
he thinks that they're monstrosities for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that.
I don't disagree,
statement.
but that also doesn't mean that RFK is not also a type of monstrosity either, being part of the ruling class.
Right. And he was born into the purple, no doubt about it.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thought experiment, and it's a good thing to talk about. I do think that a lot of people looking back at the COVID-19 pandemic will tell you that a lot of American rights were violated throughout that, regardless of where you stand on vaccines and masking and all that stuff. I told a story a couple episodes back when we were talking about our favorite bookstores, where I went into one and it was 2023 and they were still requiring masks in the store. And I put one on to go in, but they had them there. If they wouldn't have had them there, I would have left because I don't carry a mask on me. But
right. Yeah. It was last summer, I want to say, I think it was 22. Sarah and I were down the metro. I was at a conference and we wanted to swing through and get coffee and a donut at this shop on a corner that she went to growing up. And we couldn't get coffee because you couldn't go in without a mask and they weren't supplying them. And it was in the middle of summer in 22. It's like, it's a little late here, fellas, ladies and fellas. I don't know what to tell you.
I remember when they announced they had the vaccine and people were starting to get vaccinated. And I went with Dave, who we had on the show. We went to the grocery store and I drove and he was going to run in and grab something from the grocery store. And he was like, "Well, the news just came out about the masks and the vaccine and everything." And he's like, "Do you think I need to put my mask on?" I said, "Go, keep it in your pocket and try and go in without it on." And it was so weird. It was like the Berlin Wall had just fallen. He came back out and he goes, "I went in there and I didn't put a mask on. Nobody told me to put a mask on. Nobody else in there had a mask on. It's like I feel liberated." And it was a very weird feeling to feel that as an American citizen. And that's how you were probably Stockholm syndromed into some of this stuff.
Oh, for sure. And like where I live, we had 2 different lockdowns. The first lockdown was followed and the second one was largely ignored here.
Yeah.
Basically, they just put wallpaper. They just put, they locked the door and you had to call them to come in. You know what I mean? Like, it was pretty much disregarded.
Yeah. Well, and there's an interesting point in the book too, where they said, I think it was 3 years was kind of the max that the population was going to follow some of these things. Yeah. So it's like in their simulations that they ran for a pandemic like situation. So when you hear about some of these, and those were interesting, those different simulations that they did, because when you hear about these, they're doing back in the 90s and stuff, and then up until 2019 or early 2020. It's like, well, okay, they've already had this well thought out and orchestrated for a long time,
right?
And,
well, just
and I'm not saying it didn't keep people safe, but I think RFK's point is that there are other things that could have been done safer He said nobody was stockpiling masks. Nobody was looking at over-the-counter remedies or off-patent remedies. And, so I think kind of what we said earlier is the government response was less than what it should have been, regardless of how much of this book you believe or don't believe.
I think that everybody can agree that the government response was inadequate and possibly incompetent on purpose. And also a lot of the fear-mongering on Bill Gates' part was self-serving. I don't remember if he brought it up, but Microsoft made a bunch of money as a result of everybody moving over to Microsoft Teams. Yeah. Even my place of business moved from Skype to Teams because Teams is top control, right? So, of course, everybody's going to move. Yeah, Teams was ready for everybody to move to a mobile meeting system. Yeah, and I like using it. We still use it. It's nice. It's very convenient. But I mean, you can't deny that Bill Gates made a shit ton of money just from that. From that one thing. Work from home is great for these IT people. And Bezos made a ton of money. So, of course, the Washington Post is going to be supporting the lockdowns because ultimately their owner is making bank,
Yeah, for sure.
So
for sure. Well, my fingers are burning on this one, Mike.
Yes, I am near the end. I agree with you that if you're listening and you're interested in the read, you should read it. It does make some very bold claims. And
take everything with a grain of salt or do some additional research on the areas that you have issues with. I mean, like Mike and I, he's quoting stats from China. Okay, bud.
Right.
That some of the vaccine cause autism stuff. Is it true? Isn't it true? I know it's a very, very touchy subject. I don't know.
Yeah.
He doesn't mention that chapter. So
I was turned off largely because he didn't mention any of the other factors that could have played a role. Like there's correlation and there's causation, and the causation has to be more complicated than just one thing, most likely, right? So
probably true,
right? But if I have my boss reading it.
Okay.
I
gave it. I know it's got a lot. It's got to be 4.5, 4.75 out of 5 on Goodreads. I gave it a 4. I thought it was interesting. There are a few chapters that I kind of took issue with, or a few things that he mentioned that I took issue with. His writing style is fine. It's serviceable. I like to use a lot of the same phrases and things, but
it's written by a lawyer, very clearly written by a lawyer. So very data heavy.
Yes.
So, Cigar. I thought it was perfectly adequate. Second half was better than the first half. I thought the second half was better. It's light. Maybe. It has that little tinge in the first half, like a tang to it that I didn't quite care for.
The tinge never really left for me, but
mine did. But I'm also a glass of whiskey down, so that probably helps.
It probably does. Yeah, I don't know. I think if you want a Connecticut, there's better Connecticut's out there. But there is. It's fine.
The Nub Connecticut was better, in my opinion.
Yeah. And there were some other Connecticut's that were really good. I can't remember now offhand, but they're out there on our episode list. So
yes.
All right. Well, thanks for listening.
Be safe. Have fun.